Magnus, half time through the year, how are we doing?
Well, I think we're doing well in terms of going to the strategic direction. We are quite clearly doing what we're saying that we're going to do. We are investing in wind. We are growing in customer sales. We have had a good production. And we're investing quite a lot in the distribution network. So a lot of the things that we have said that we're going to do, we are doing. But the result is, of course, more or less the same as last year with some differences in it. But I think the direction is really good.
And looking at the result as such, at some levels we seem to improve, others we don't. Could you please explain?
That's absolutely true. Our generation business is showing a strong result, mainly due to the price increases. Of course, to a large part offset by the hedges, which is the whole point with the hedges. Our wind business is also improving. Mainly we see increased capacity online compared to last year, but there is also a price effect here. Customer solutions are increasing both number of customers and gross margin. Our heat business is struggling, we clearly see that, and we're keeping our costs at a flat line, so a bit up and a bit down.
And we'll come back to the heat business, but first, I mean, we have electricity prices, sales, production, and customer numbers, particularly business customer numbers improving. You know, what's behind the numbers?
Well, I think the electricity price is an interesting one where we clearly see an upturn based on different things you can say if we look at the continental side. And what is driving the whole picture is, of course, increased fuel prices, both on coal and gas, but also on CO2 rights. And then if you look to the Nordic situation, of course, we have had a very dry situation. First, a very cold spell, and then a very dry season. So we don't have at all much water in the system, and that drives prices up, and we can see that now coming into the system. If that is long term is another question, of course, but short term we can see that driver. Then if we look to the customer growth, and particularly you asked about customers, business customers, and I think what we can see, we have made several long-term deals with customers. We can see that as a growth opportunity, I believe, where also this big, large corporations want to be part of changing the world to a fossil-free world, and if they can actually be part of investing in new production based on fossil-free production, I think we will see more of that, and that's actually what we have also seen during this first half year in this year.
But Anna, as you said, heat had a tough, or seems to have another tough quarter, the second quarter. Why?
Well, we do see a price increase also in continental Europe, but what we first and foremost see is an increase in the fuel prices and in the CO2 prices. We see record high CO2 prices. So the margin for our heat business, the clean dark spread, which is the margin between the fuel and the CO2 on one hand and the price on the other, is very squeezed. And that is clearly visible in our heat business. We are progressing well in terms of our CO2 roadmap, so we will long term be less exposed to this, but right now it's hitting our heat business and it will continue to do so during the rest of the year most likely.
We see wind growing in importance for us, and with the Blakeliden wind farm in the north of Sweden, we will considerably expand our wind business also here in Sweden. You know, what's the potential in Sweden?
Well, I mean, the potential is very big, but I think that the very big investments will come after 2030 when we are discussing to replace over time the nuclear operations in Sweden. But until then, of course, there is also opportunities to invest. We are going to close down some nuclear in Sweden, which we already have both in our company and in other companies. So we think there is some room for that, and we want to have an established position. And I think this Blakeliden Fäbodberget project has shown that we can also produce projects with really low costs in Sweden. I think that drives the investments. So we will see what comes for the future, but definitely there is an interest from the Vattenfall side also to take part in the expansion in Sweden.
The issue of overcapacity, is that something that we are...
Yeah, I mean, you can always discuss that. What is the end of the balance over time? We believe also that consumption will start going up because we will see electrification. And we have a balanced closure now of some production, so I don't see that is imminent. That is, of course, a risk, and that's why it's so important that if anything you're going to invest, you have to be sure that you have very competitive costs. but it's really very hard to say whether there is a clear overcapacity situation coming up. I think that the issue that we could see over time could be that we will see in very cold spells that there is a lack of power capacity at that particular moment, and that, in my view, would also increase the value of the hydropower that we have in our company.
But speaking of investments, so far this year we have actually invested or spent some 9 billion Swedish crowns, particularly in wind and our distribution networks business. Where will we put our money the rest of the year, and where?
We will definitely continue to invest in wind. It is one of our main growth areas. So for the next 2 years, 60% of our growth investments will go into our wind business. We also do quite large maintenance investments, particularly in generation and in our heat business. In distribution as well, we do both maintenance and growth investments. It's very important for us going forward, and we certainly hope that the new regulation will make it doable for us to continue down that route.
So a news piece of this quarter was some regulatory policy changes in the Netherlands, pointing to a phase out of coal and fossil. How will that impact our business in the Netherlands, Magnus?
Well, first of all, there has been a long discussion going on in the Netherlands about coal phase out, and I think we now see a clear path. They've said that from now on it's not allowed, but there are 5 exceptions. One of the exceptions is Hemweg 8, that will be able to produce until 2024, the end of 2024. So now it's up to us to really see what is the optimal closing time for the Hemweg 8 plant, and that's what we are working on. But I think it's good that we have clarity on that. It's not a very big financial issue for us either, so if we can do it in a good way, I think we are happy with that decision.
And during the quarter we also started the construction of the test plant in Sweden for decarbonizing steel production. How do you see the potential for these kinds of industry partnership, also perhaps in other markets?
Well, of course they should be there also in other markets when we see more renewable electricity coming on in the system, and we can use that to electrify processes that emit CO2. That's not only in Sweden, of course, that's also on the continent. And we clearly see an opportunity where we want to develop that cooperation. We will take that stepwise. We have made some significant, I think, steps forward in Sweden, and we want to expand that also in other markets. And I think from a Vattenfall perspective, to be this sort of corporate partner for big companies in terms of electrification of processes is a very strong position that we can take, and I don't see anybody else really doing that. So I think we're well ahead, and we should keep that momentum.
So we're halfway through the year. How do you see Vattenfall developing the rest of the year, Anna?
Well, I see a continued good development. We have more capacity online in wind this year compared to last, and we see that the prices, at least the way it looks now, will continue to be at a high level. So that will of course have a positive impact for us. On the other hand, we will continue to have challenges in our heat business, and 2018 is also a heavy investment year for us. We have already earlier indicated that we will not reach our FFO over adjusted net debt target this year, and that is according to plan due to these heavy investments. But the positive trend that we saw already 2017 is definitely going to continue also this year.
Magnus, do you want to add something to?
Well, my expectations are, of course, that we continue along the path that we have shown in the strategy, and that we increase the customer numbers, we increase the sales. I think we are very happy now that we sit on a lot of hydropower, because we are in a squeezed situation in terms of production of electricity availability in Sweden. I think that's a great value, which of course we would extract during the autumn as well. And we have several other corporations ahead of us that I think we should materialize. So there's a lot of things, proof points coming along, which is showing the direction for the group, and I think I really see that continuing also for the rest of the year and the years ahead, of course.
Thank you both for your time, and have a great summer.
Thank you very much.
You too. Thank you.